encouraged so that we can better understand your views. Please be aware that individual student information or particular personnel issues will not be discussed by this board during public session. When recognized by the board president, please state your name and address. Statements are restricted to a maximum of 3 minutes, and speakers will be notified by the board president when their time has expired. When speaking, the public shall direct their comments to the board and not to district staff or other audience members. Speakers shall not expect board members to answer questions during public comment. Questions shall be referred to the superintendent or his or her designee for review, study, and response. If appropriate, the board may request the issue be a discussion item at a future Board of Education meeting or Board of Education committee meeting. Is there anybody in the audience that would wish to address the board? Mrs. Lisicki.
Nancy Lisicki, 223 East Main Street, Downtown. So I see on the agenda tonight you have the discussion on the first reading of new policy about the transportation to child safety zones, and I'm hoping that during the board's discussion you talk about if I read the policy correctly, it talks about a deadline of like March 1st for people to get petitions in so that planning can occur for the next year. So I'm hoping the board will talk about whether or not you're planning on not implementing this until the following year with that deadline, or if the board's going to put some kind of a different deadline in just temporarily for this year, so that if it is truly adopted in August, that this could start for this year. I think that's good. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the board? Okay, at this time. So, yes, in light of the recent loss of Russ Snyder, we'd like to have a moment of silence in his memory, as this evening is his calling hours. Thank you. So, if we could just have a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you. Are we going to have any for executive? Okay. So we have a possible executive session subject to board approval with regard to discussing the employment history of a particular person. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? Yeah. Do I have a second? Art? Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. So we will retire to executive session and be back hopefully shortly. Okay, so we come back into session at 6:22. Okay, so moving on with our agenda, we are going to skip the reports section of the agenda this evening and move on to our initial consent agenda in an effort to expedite the business of the Board of Education, but in no way meant to diminish the importance of each item. Consent agenda may be used for the items in this section. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any one board member. Items not removed will be adopted by general consent without debate. Any removed items may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the board. do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda for business dealings, having to do with approval of prior board minutes, warrants for May of 2022, Treasurer's report of May 2022, surplus property, books, and yeah, that would be all for the business action. I have a motion? Jen? Second? Ron. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay. Consent action personnel. Resolved that the Board of Education of the Greater Johnstown School District, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve the following personnel matters. There is a list of resignations, leaves of absence, miscellaneous creations, adjustments, and appointments. We have also a number of corrections from a prior approval action regarding the, I believe that's the summer school hours, correct? And that is the summary of the personnel action. Do I have a motion to accept? Do I have a motion for that item? Art? Sure. Thank you. Second? March? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, 6-0. Consent action approval of CSE, CPSE 504 committee minutes. Motion to approve the minutes of the following committee for preschool special education meetings, committee for special education meetings, and section 504 committee meetings is held on February 28th, 2022, and June 1, 7, 9, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16, 21, 23, 24 of the year 2022. Do I have a motion? Well, thank you. Second? Jen, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, 6-0. Action item, business. So the first item is to abolish policy 7110. Do I have a motion for the abolition of policy 7110? Jen, thank you. Do I have a second? Art, thank you. Do I have any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay. That's 6-0.
Could I just explain that soon you'll see a revised policy 7109, which you may have read, or it'll take the place of this.
Okay. We have the following second item: establish the Smart Schools Bond Act SSBA Capital Fund budget in the amount of $1,067,916, with a contractual assignment of $532,450 and a supply assignment of $535,466. The district treasurer and deputy treasurer are authorized to make adjustments to the budget as costs of the project become better defined. Do I have a motion? Ron? Second? Jen? Do I have any further discussion?
So this is no increase to our budget, right? The budget still remains the same,
Right.
just reallocates it.
The smart bond, which has now been 10 years or so in the making, it is a grant to our school district in that amount, and we just have to create this capital fund as a place to deposit that.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? 6-0.
Thank you.
Transportation purchase. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the district treasurer and deputy treasurer to transfer $344,721 from the 2015 bus purchase reserve to the general fund budget for purposes of purchasing 3 66-passenger buses and a van or suburban vehicle for student transportation in accordance with the proposition approved by district voters on May 17th, 2022. Do I have a motion? Will? Second by Ron. Any discussion?
Yes, just a little bit. These are replacing buses, right? So the buses that are being replaced, are we trading them in? Do we sell them?
That you're closer to it than
So
I am.
we trade them in, so we identify those buses that are beyond their useful life. And the quote that we did receive in replacement of the buses does trade those vehicles in.
Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor? 6-0. Item 4, change order approval process. Whereas the Greater Johnstown School District is frequently involved in capital projects, identified as projects, and whereas it can be reasonably anticipated that there will be necessary and required changes in the scope and or cost of the work of the projects, which will result in the issuance of change orders and or construction change directives, herein collectively referred to as change orders, being necessary, which may reflect changes in the work and or contract sums for various prime contractor agreements, and whereas the Board of Education wishes to facilitate the timeliness of work associated with capital construction projects and the need to, at times, approve change orders in an efficient and expeditious manner as the project unfolds, and whereas any such change orders to be considered must first have the recommendation and approval of the school district's architect and construction manager, if one is involved, for consideration for approval by the school district, and whereas the Board of Education has created a facilities committee that reviews and recommends matters relating to capital projects to the board for its consideration, and whereas the superintendent of schools has discussed this issue with the Board of Education and the board wishes to establish a clear approval authority for such change orders. Therefore, it is hereby resolved, the board hereby establishes the following approval authority for such change orders. Value of the change order and the required level of approval. For $0 to $10,000, the assistant superintendent will have authority for approval. $10,001 to $25,000, the superintendent of schools will have approval authority. $25,001 and above requires Board of Education approval. Any change orders approved below the level of the Board of Education as set forth above, $25,000 or less, shall be reported to the Facilities Committee at its next meeting and to the Board of Education at its next regular meeting for informational purposes. The superintendent of schools shall regularly report to the Facilities Committee and Board of Education on the status of change order approvals and their impact on individual contract amounts and project budgets for all such approvals. The use of allowance monies in approved contracts for construction are authorized to be approved by the superintendent of schools and or assistant superintendent in consultation with the Facilities Committee. The superintendent shall report to the Facilities Committee and Board of Education at their next regularly scheduled meetings the use of any allowance monies for informational purposes. The Board of Education authorizes the assistant superintendent and superintendent of schools to sign all change orders as required by the New York State Education Department in accordance with the forms established for each change order document and consistent with this policy. This resolution is effective immediately and shall be effective until such time as it is rescinded or amended by the Board of Education at any later date. Do I have a motion for this resolution? Marge? Second, Jen? Do I have discussion?
Yeah, why couldn't this been grouped with others? Why do we have to read the whole thing?
Because I feel it's important that it be in the public record, that there's an understanding of the process. And I didn't think it was that long that we couldn't suffer through a few minutes of narrative.
Yeah, but most people read this already.
I'm not convinced of that, but suffice, I read it, so.
Second question.
Yeah.
Do we currently have anything like this in place? Are we changing levels, so there's nothing like this in place?
At this point, we don't, but I think it's, Alicia and I both feel it's important to establish this so that we can have a pretty nimble process. Yeah. It's gonna be another agenda item on our facilities, and audit budget finances for sure.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? 6-0, thank you. Action items, personnel. I do not believe there's anybody in the audience at this time who will be receiving anything. Does any, yes, Art,
Make that motion.
to shorten to a consent agenda for these items? Okay, Ron, do you approve? Second?
Definitely.
Okay. All right, so Art made the motion, Ron seconded. We will bundle all personnel action items under one consent agenda. So do I have any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay.
We have a motion, I'm sorry, I missed the motion.
Yeah, the motion was to bundle all personnel items
Yes.
under one consent agenda.
By
Art,
Art,
and seconded by Ron.
thank you.
So, board discussion items. We have a first reading of a new policy, 5633, for gender-neutral single occupancy bathrooms. Is there any board discussion about this policy for review? Okay, hearing no questions.
It's a required policy by law, just so that everybody is reminded of that. It's pretty minimal, and we are identifying all of our single occupancy not all of them, but critical ones as gender neutral bathrooms.
Single occupancy.
Single occupancy. Some of the signage is up already, but we're a little behind, I think, in some of our signage as well.
So I guess at the next meeting, we can move toward a final reading. We are going to strike item 2 regarding the transportation child safety zones, as we are awaiting further data through an efficiency report from BOCES, and this will be picked up at a later date. Annual review of policy 5220, investments policy. I do not believe there was any changes on that policy. My only question, do we actively use that policy to invest money in other than a bank account?
We do, but that is something that's priority this year, to take a closer look on how we're investing our monies.
Okay.
We do currently have any money market interest bearing accounts right now,
Okay,
especially our reserve money, but that's something once the Baker and I will take a greater look at this year.
okay, all right, very good.
And also bring it forward to audit budget and finance as well.
Okay, excellent. We also have the annual review of policy 5410, purchasing policy. Does anybody have any questions about that? Again, no changes to that policy? Okay, hearing none. Annual review of policy 8260, Title I parent and family engagement. Again, no change to that either. Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. So that concludes most of our agenda. We have a few informational items. August 16th, a Tuesday, will be the Academic and Extracurricular Committee at 5:30 p.m. at Knox, I believe up in the library. August 16th.
Well, actually, this room now, I think, can serve a lot of the board's functions.
Okay.
And it does have some air and what's
Okay.
comfortable.
So it will not be in the library, it will in fact be in the former band room. And August 16th, Facilities Committee, same evening, same bad time, well, not same bad time. 1 hour after bad time, 6:30 p.m. in the former band room. August 18th, the Board of Education Business Meeting and Capital Outlay Workshop at 6 p.m. here in the auditorium. I don't believe we have any further executive session items to discuss. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Art, can I have a second? Will, very good. All those in favor? Art? 6-0, thank you.